space movies. Without them, George Clooney, Brad Pitt, Matt Damon, Ben Affleck, Sandra Bullock, and Hathaway would have nothing in common other than the Ocean's franchise. So with the release of the new space adventure movie Ad Astra, I'm going to be talking about space movies in general because there are quite a few of them, especially in recent years. It seems like this type of year we always get something of the sort in this genre. Now when you're talking about space movies, sci-fi also creeps into it, and there's a lot of even fantasy space movies such as like Star Wars, Star Trek, all those sorts of movies. But I'm going to be talking more specifically about a certain type of space sci-fi movie, and that's the just adventure one, the one that seems plausible, at least to a certain extent, where us as humans are all going on one common mission to reach the ends of this world, I guess. I'm going to be talking about Gravity, Interstellar, The Martian, First Man, and then, of course, Ad Astra. And the thing that I want to figure out in this video is why are these movies so attractive to us? Why can we not stop watching space movies? Now, when you look at the history of space movies, they have existed pretty much ever since film has been around. This idea of going to the moon, reaching the outer limits of this world has always been attracted to us because we want adventure. We want to reach new places that we have never been before. However, I do got to give credit to one of the most influential pioneers in space movies, and that's 2001: A Space Odyssey.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Now again, there were plenty of space movies and sci-fi movies before this one, but this really revolutionized how most space and sci-fi movies are made today. This movie was made at a time right before we actually made it to the moon, and this movie was so realistic that people thought that they filmed the moon landing on the same set of this movie. Over the next couple years, movies like Star Trek and Star Wars became just pop culture giants that we could not consume enough of, but they all kind of use the same effects that were used in 2001. You see, one of the biggest reasons that space movies are so fun to watch on film was a trick that they used in 2001: A Space Odyssey, and that's the technical effects that you're able to produce that you can't in other movies. Effects such as sound and visuals. Space gives us the freedom to be creative as we want when we create these elements because, first off, not a lot of people have been out there to know what it's actually like, but a lot of these movies show places that we have not been yet, so they are able to create this new location for us and just create the visuals and sounds that go along with it. Not only that, but being in space offers a lot more options as far as not a lot of gravity to work with, so you can kind of do a lot of cool shots. And sure, some of these shots have been overdone, and now it's a cliche at this point, such as the flying in space tied to a rope, the walking on walls, or something of the sort. And other movies have done this as well. However, when it is done in space, it feels so much more realistic and gives us so many more options of what we're able to do with these technical effects. So you take all of that, plus they almost always have an amazing score visually, and for the sounds that they produce. Space movies really can't be beat in these two areas. Another great thing that space movies can do is very easy world building that seems kind of like the day after tomorrow, near future, but also kind of not obtainable at this moment. Whether it's a future that we're scared of reaching, or a future where we have space stations kind of everywhere on Mars and we can just go and explore the cosmos. Space movies do a great job creating a world that doesn't need to be overly explained. Like, hey, look at, we invented this, isn't this cool? It's just kind of there's no explanation, and we all understand it and can easily fit ourselves into that world that they created. We owe a lot to 2001: A Space Odyssey for setting the stage for what these movies can become.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
But now let's talk about 4 specific areas within the script that these movies tend to reproduce. The first one is a common goal and mission. The unique thing about space movies is that everyone comes together to work towards a common goal. And as an audience, we like to see that. Most movies are about some form of conflict, but if anything, space movies bring people together. They unite the whole world, whether it's different countries working together, or a lot of times it's just us as Americans, but they work together for a common goal, and that's something that not a lot of other movies see done. Now, with the 4 movies I mentioned earlier, I don't even think I need to explain how they have a common goal because it's just that obvious. That's the plot of the movie. It's each one of these movies has a specific problem, and it's a team of astronauts, it's a team of scientists, whatever it may be, they all work together to fix this problem, which is a great segue into point number 2. Space movies do not have a lot of antagonists. Let me explain. So just to break it down so simple for you, most plot lines, scripts, books, movies, whatever it may be, has a protagonist and an antagonist. The antagonist is also just kind of known as the bad guy, right? The protagonist is the one trying to stop this problem, and the antagonist is trying to cause the problem. With space movies, you don't have a lot of that. Kind of going into point number 1 of them working towards the same common goal, really the goal or the issue that they're trying to fix through the goal is the antagonist more than anything. Rarely can you find a human being the antagonist and working against the common goal or mission, except maybe Matt Damon in Interstellar, but even then, he's not even the central point to where the characters are focused around. The antagonist is always replaced from a human to an issue, and again, with point number 1, the common goal of everyone working together, it makes us feel a little bit better that there aren't really any bad guys in these situations. Point number 3 is that we know the stakes, specifically of the mission, but also just space in general. Now, the reason we know the stakes is partly because space is so unknown to us. There's such a fear of being out there that when we see these characters do all these things as far as goals and missions and what have you, it terrifies us because we don't know what's going to happen to them. In Gravity and Interstellar, they could be lost in space forever, either just floating around there or get sucked into a black hole, which no one has ever been to. The Martian brings out this fear in us of being left on Mars, which could not be a more terrifying thing, especially with all the lack of communication. And then finally, First Man just gives us the fear of death, which is so obviously stated in the movie, and a realistic fear when it comes to being an astronaut.
What are the chances of not coming back?
Most movies have to spend a good amount of time explaining the stakes, especially when it comes to action or adventure, and they need to explain to the audience this is what happens if our heroes fail. In space movies, they don't need to do that. They jump right into it. There's no explanation. We already completely understand where they are at and the dangers of this mission that they're trying to complete. The last point about these movies that is so enjoyable to watch, and it's the relationships of the characters. Tagging on to the last point of us knowing the stakes, when we do know those stakes and the characters understand the stakes, it makes their character development so much more real and natural, because when you are facing death, sometimes your biggest character development comes out. 4 movies that I mentioned hit very hard when it comes to character development, and a lot of the plot of the movie relies on these characters' motivation. I think First Man and Interstellar are kind of more obvious about this. First Man is really just about a man dealing with his family, and space is just kind of like the goal that's keeping him away from his family. And Interstellar, every single part of that movie is just a father-daughter relationship, and what he will do to protect his children and their future on this earth. The Martian is probably the movie that follows this example the least. However, the relationships that they have to Matt Damon's character still explains a lot of the plot of the movie, and without that, it just would be dry. And I know I was only talking about 4 movies, but I gotta bring up Star Wars because they do this the best. In fact, that's been one of the biggest complaints of Star Wars in the past couple of years, is that it only focuses on one specific family. But I do think with the combination of 2001: A Space Odyssey coming out, being the pioneer for these visual and sound effects, and then Star Wars kind of giving way to the plot that space movies would have, now we have all these space movies that kind of fit into this one central genre. So where does Ad Astra fall into all of this? When it comes to the group, goal, and mission, really, it's not a group. It's kind of one person, which is fine. It's not like a bad thing, but you lose that sense of community and coming together working towards a common goal. Lack of antagonist. Yes, this is correct. There's not one specific antagonist, and the antagonist really is just space as a whole, but there are a lot of people that try to stop him along the way, and so it does give you this kind of bad guys and good guy feel to it. Now, we do know the stakes, and that's very apparent in this movie, and that's death, and that's something that you really can't get wrong while making a space movie. But what this movie does do is focus very heavily on the relationship between characters, more specifically a father-son dynamic. And whether or not you buy into this relationship of a father and son is gonna really determine how much you like this movie. Now, as far as everything else goes, technical, visuals, sound effects, beautiful. The world building in this movie is probably the most interesting thing, and I wanted to see more of it. However, after all those points, why is Ad Astra becoming one of the least successful movies of all these space movies? Now, if we are looking specifically at box office, there is a very steady decline in revenue that these space movies make. Gravity opens up with 55 million domestic and ends with a 274 million. Interstellar then makes 47 million in its opening weekend and ends with 188 million. The Martian picks it up a bit by opening with 54 million and ending with 228 million, but then we hit the real decline with First Man. $16 million opening, ending $44 million all time. Now, at the time of recording this video, Ad Astra currently has a $19 million opening, but only $22 million domestic. So, Ad Astra is probably going to make more than First Man, but it's coming nowhere close to what these space movies were 3 years ago. So are these tropes being overused? Do we need a refresher when it comes to the space adventure movie genre? I don't know. I can't tell you. These are just the observations and the connections that I see between all these movies, and maybe we are just getting tired of it. Maybe we do need a resurgence of new space movie tropes. Whatever you think the reason is, comment below. Let me know. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Also, what's your favorite space movie of these? It's going to be a little controversial, but I'm going to order them. The Martian, Interstellar, Gravity, Ad Astra, First Man. Sticking with it. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Hit that like button, leave a lot of comments, tell me what you think of this video, and I will see you next time.